Afternoon. Welcome. I don't think I need this. He may, but I think I'm loud enough. Welcome. How is everyone tonight? You enjoying this absolutely gorgeous weather, right? And do you hear there's a freeze warning? Yeah, it's such a tease. Welcome to tonight's lecture, sponsored by the Blair County Historical Society. How many of you are members of the Blair County Historical Society? Yeah, I had to call you on the spot, didn't I? All right, so the Blair County Historical Society, we have these out there, which is a membership application. You can also apply online. The benefits of becoming a member of the Historical Society provides several benefits, to include free tours of the Baker Mansion during operating hours. Normally, it's $10 for adults, $5 for children. Children under 3 are free. But if you get a membership, then when we're open, you can come for a tour with no charge. The only exception is for the special exhibit, which is 2 Centuries of Bridal Fashion. That is at $5 across the board for everyone, but you can tour the mansion at any time. You also get a 10% discount off of in-store purchases. You also are invited to special events like our annual dinner. And the cost is not that much. It's $25 for an individual, $35 for a family, and that's for the whole year. You will also receive a quarterly newsletter called The Mansion, which is packed full of wonderful history. Each newsletter features an article that is well researched about Blair County history, and you can receive that digitally or you can receive it through the mail. So if you're interested, just feel free to stop by and see us on the way out, pick up one of these, or go to our website. Just a couple little housekeeping items. If you have not been here today, the Blair County Historical Society would like to thank the Railroaders Museum for allowing us to have the presentation here. If you need the restroom, it is right out here around the corner. The emergency exit, of course, is at the front doors there. If you have any questions, we will be sitting out at the front. I do encourage you, if you have not toured here, to go onto their website and book a tour or just come in and visit. The Railroaders Museum is amazing. It really is amazing. Some upcoming events that we have coming to Blair County and the Baker Mansion. Who remembers the teas? Has anybody ever done the mansion teas before? We're bringing them back. In fact, the next one is this Sunday, which is going to be, Patty Wortman is going to be doing a presentation on Victorian teas and etiquette. In June, we are going to be featuring Mary Kramer on the Blair Gardens. Mary Kramer helped found the gardens as they are today. She has been with the Blair Garden Club for over 50 years and helped research and design the gardens as you see today, and she's still with the Blair Garden Club, and she will be our June presenter. Our next lecture is going to be on June 21st. It will be presented by Kevin Stiver, Glenn White, The Town That Was Forgotten. This young man is still in high school and is currently writing a book. So it's actually fantastic, and that is going to be here also, same time on June 21st. And the last thing I have is the Children's Workshop. We are introducing a new program into the community. This workshop is designed for 4th to 8th graders to learn how to document their history. The question I ask the kids during the workshop is, when is the last time that you used a floppy disk? Does anybody remember floppy disks? When's the last time that you checked your MySpace? Your digital footprint will not be available in 50 years. However, I can tell you the life stories of the Baker family, and I can tell you what they had for dinner, and I can tell you a lot of the pieces in the mansion and the history behind them, when they were bought, what significance they had because of the written word left behind. This program is designed to help teach children how to do that, how to journal, and it also is a family bonding. It teaches them how to interview their parents and grandparents for educational and history purposes. The Genealogical Society, we will be presenting that information, and they will also be building a time capsule. So we encourage this. We are partnering with Blair County Libraries. There are several dates available in the various libraries throughout Blair County. This is available on our website, and we also have flyers out here on all the information that I have presented. Okay, so is there any questions? I know I'm talking fast, but to save on some time here. So our presenter this evening is right there. Okay.
I'm here.
Okay. Our
Star standing off stage.
sounds good. Our presenter this evening is Jim Lowe. I am very happy to introduce Jim, who is not just our presenter, but also the Blair County Historical Society's chair. He took over chair in 2023. I would like to recognize Dr. Michael Farrow here. Raise your hand. Who was our previous chair. He is now our vice chair. And if you go out, when you first came in, you saw all the publications. All the publications out there were written by two people, Jim Lowe and Dr. Farrow. Packed full of history. Really encourage you. They are for sale. And if you want to come after the show, please check those out. If you're not interested, we are accepting donations to help fund the future lectures. Jim Lowe is a retired school teacher who actually just retired last year after serving 33 years in Altoona School District as a history teacher. He also was presented, if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year. Is that correct?
History teacher of the year. That gave me an upgrade.
The-
I'll take it.
Okay, that sounds good. The Pennsylvania History Teacher of the Year, which is a very prominent award. And tonight he is presenting the Blair County's Fallen Heroes, World War II, or World War I, to the War on Terror. And I would like to present Jim Lowe.
Thank you. Okay, good evening, everyone. I will try and stay near the microphone, but I do have a big mouth, so I don't have a problem projecting typically after being in the classroom for so many years. The title of my presentation tonight is Our Fallen Heroes from Blair County, World War I through to the War on Terror. And I have to tell you this up front, if I did just Altoona, the men and 2 women from Altoona, that would be 600. So we'd be here for a long time. So I have to say up front, if you came here expecting maybe to hear a story of someone you were aware of, chances are they may not be in tonight's presentation, but I'll tell you how you can find out more information about them as well. I've kind of limited the number down to about 25 veterans to tell stories that I think are compelling and deserve to be remembered, but they really all deserve to be remembered. A little background on how I got to this point of spending all this time doing this research. I was at a antique mall a few years ago. In fact, I think it's more than a few years ago. Time now it starts to run together at the age I am at this point. And I picked up a small baggie of brochures and things labeled Altoona History. It was $2. I was excited. And my wife probably thought, oh, more stuff for the house. And I started going through the bag, and inside the bag was this little program, which happens to be from the church I attend, First Lutheran Church in downtown Altoona. And it's a program from a reception they had for returning veterans from World War II. And I was stunned when I opened the book and saw how many, I know it's difficult to see. If I would have been a better presenter, I'd have put a shot of it up there on the screen. But there are more people listed in here that served in World War II from my church than there are current members, which really shocked me. But what hit me most is on the first page, it was dedicated to 14 members of my church that were killed during the war. And I thought, boy, I would love to know their stories. And that's what began this long odyssey for me of researching local veterans who were killed during our wars. And in the end result, I had this. The Altoona School District, who was my employer, was looking for a new idea for ways to teach history and other subjects to high school students. And they were focusing on something called project-based learning. And what they asked was, how can we teach students about history and other subjects by students doing the work instead of just opening a textbook and memorizing things? So I thought, well, I could teach them how to do the research that I did for on veterans. So I compiled a list of veterans from the area that were killed. The first book that we did was on World War II. And the day if I can find it here, the day the student projects were due was the day that everything was shut down because of COVID. So that actually worked out. I'm probably the first person that's ever going to say something positive about the COVID shutdown, because in the end, I was able to put this book together. And if you see how thick it is, it's quite the volume, the tome, you might say. All of these are biographies on fallen soldiers and sailors, airmen, and there's one nurse in here from Altoona. This is just Altoona during World War II. And what I'm grateful for about the COVID shutdown is I spent from that March until the end of the summer every day checking the student research, rewriting, fixing things that needed to be fixed, and ended up with that book. I was so compelled by the success of the first book, either at or off my rocker, that when COVID was over, with my next group of students, I put together a second book. This one includes World War I through to the War on Terror, with inclusive of some World War II veterans that have been missed on local memorials. I was able to locate some names that were left out before, so they are included in here. I mentioned both of them because we have a limited number still available. We have one copy of the World War II book still available, and we have, I believe, 3 copies of the all-inclusive book available. If you're interested in those, they are on the counter as well outside. So let me go ahead and get started. And my teacher instinct in me can't go on without asking everyone a question. So with each break page here, separating the wars, I have a picture of a local monument or memorial to soldiers from Altoona. And I picked one here from World War I. Just by a show of hands, I'm not going to call anybody out. By a show of hands, how many of you know where that monument is located?
Is that the one at Stevens Funeral Home?
Yes, that is the one located at Stevens Funeral Home. Very good. Well, thank you. Because I think as we go through this, you're going to find that there are quite a few of these memorials and monuments that you may not be aware of. So very good. We at least got the first one. So let me go through the veterans I selected for World War I. And I tried to be fair to all branches of the military and make sure I had Army, Navy, Marines, and we have, of course, then when the Air Corps is created in World War II, I have them as well. So we have a little bit of everybody. It's right to the left of the building, between the building and the church. So my first veteran is Jacob Furr. He was born in Altoona in 1895, and I'd like to give some background information on each person just to make them more like you and I. Not just their military record, but to show that they went to the same schools that we went to, they did the same activities that we did, they attended the same churches we attend, and in some cases, I think this always gets a hook in with the students with their interests. They might have lived on the same block or even, in a couple of cases, in the same house that we live in today. So you'll notice a lot of these veterans from World War I came from larger families. He attended Altoona schools. It doesn't say graduated because most of the veterans from World War I finished grammar school and that was it. Then they went to work for the Pennsylvania Railroad. There were only 7 Altoona high school students actually killed in World War I. With his experience working for the Pennsylvania Railroad in the machine shop, he joined the Navy in June of 1917. That's about 6 weeks after our entry to the war when he joined the Navy. And of course, his skill set from being involved in the machine shop led to his assignment to the USS Cyclops. It was a ore carrier which was carrying manganese coming back from Brazil. And it was last heard from on March 4th, 1918. Everyone blamed it on a German submarine. They thought it was a result of a German submarine sinking. It was not. The ship was overloaded and it sank in the open sea during a very heavy storm. That wasn't discovered until after the war. This is the worst U.S. Navy loss of life, not directly related to combat, ever, not just in World War I. So I think what you'll see as I go through some of these stories, there are Blair County soldiers and sailors involved in all of these well-known incidents and tragedies that happened during wartime. One of the questions that usually comes up, and I'll be quick about this, because my wife's kind enough to sit in the first row and give me that look of, she just pointed to her watch that I'm spending too much time on one individual person. How do I get all this information? A great resource for this is a database called Fold 3, which has military records. So if you're ever looking for like a family member, that's a great resource to use. And this is a card I obtained from Fold 3 that has his military record. Okay, second, we'll switch up here and to Frank Izzo. Frank was born in Altoona in May of 1896. Large family, 6 sisters, 4 brothers. He actually graduated from Altoona High School, so this is part of that small group of 7. He attended Mount Carmel and founded the Young Men's Group there. Maybe someone here is a member of Mount Carmel and knows if that organization still exists.
Well, not the Young Men's Group, but Mount Carmel's still.
Right, I do know that. I didn't know if the Young Men's Group was still a functioning group there. After high school, he went to New York. He was interested in the theater arts as he was in high school. And during his time in school there, before he joined the military, he was purchasing Liberty bonds to help with the war effort, and he thought those would help him continue to pay for his schooling. That's not the first time you're going to hear that story. I'm particularly partial to this one because he was a founding member of Blair County Historical Society, and he was our first junior member. He was drafted in February of 1918, went to Camp Lee in Virginia for his training. He was part of what a lot of you will recognize, the Keystone Division, the 28th Division, given the nickname the Bloody Bucket because of all the fighting they went through. He arrived in France about 90 days after his calling up to service, one of the 90-day wonders. During the Second Battle of the Marne, he was wounded, and this gives you an idea of the lack of proper medical care then because he was wounded, and then 3 days later, he died. Also, sort of the sad story of how long it took to get someone home from the front. His body did not arrive back here in Altoona until 1921. He is buried in Calvary Cemetery. The program that's on the left is a memorial service held for him at Altoona High School. That's in my collection, and there you see the 7 Altoona High School students who were killed during the war. That's his grave marker at Calvary. So, great marker, I believe. William Crawford. William Crawford was born in Tyrone, moved to Altoona, which is pretty common during this time period, especially as people are looking to get jobs with the Pennsylvania Railroad. This is the first one of the veterans I chose that is married, and he joined the Naval Reserve in April of 1918, and then as the demands for new sailors increased during the war, he was called up for duty. His assignment was the USS Ticonderoga, which was an armed cargo ship. He was on his 4th transatlantic voyage in September of 1918 when the Ticonderoga got into a running 3-hour battle with U-152, that's a German submarine. Now, we mostly think of German submarines as firing off some torpedoes and sinking a ship, and that's the end of the story. But during World War I, they were able to carry such a small number of torpedoes that German submarines would often surface and maybe use one torpedo and then engage the ship in surface combat until they were able to cause the ship to sink. That's why we started arming our cargo ships. Eventually, the Ticonderoga did sink, and if you look at the number of survivors, that's a pretty horrendous number when you think of a cargo ship going down, and I have to add to this story, it's a really sad part of the story. Here's the article from the Altoona Mirror at that time. U-152 continued to fire on the Ticonderoga as it sank and as the man abandoned ship. So a good number of them were actually killed, not during the combat phase of the goings-on between the ship and the submarine, but while they had acknowledged that they were giving up ship and the Germans continued to fire. My next selection for World War I is Norman Litzinger, born in Asheville. 2 sisters, 1 brother. A little different story here. He had taken over the family farm and livery stable, but decided that wasn't the right direction in life for him. He wanted to experience the big city. So he came to Altoona, and like some others, he got a job working for the Pennsylvania Railroad. You see a theme here that continues. And in May of 1917, that's about 5 weeks after our declaration of war, he joined the Army. And this kind of fits the way that our young people communicate today. He informed his family he had joined the Army by postcard. He stopped and bought a postcard before he was on the train heading off to camp, and that's how he told them. Sort of the way, young people today tell their family things by text message. Unlike most of our local soldiers who served in the 28th Division in World War I, he served in the Big Red 1, the 1st Division, arrived in France in 1918. One of the really neat things about the Altoona Mirror and the Altoona Tribune at this time is they often published letters that came home from the soldiers. So I know a whole lot about Corporal Litzinger. His writings are kind of sad about how much he was homesick, how he misses meals that his grandmother made, how he missed going to an ice cream shop with his cousin, who was also his best friend. And he was involved pretty much with the 1st Division in heavy combat throughout the spring and summer of that year, and he was killed in action in July of 1918. Now, I'll add this too, which I left the details out. The newspapers were also very clear exactly how they were killed in action. So unlike World War II and Korea and Vietnam, I have to look at reports made after the battle. It's pretty clear in the newspaper exactly what happened. I left the details out, but they were printed in the paper and confirmed by one of his fellow soldiers who wrote a letter, and they printed that in the paper also. He is buried in France. I mentioned that there were 2 women, and the first of those 2 women is Olive Yingling, born in Altoona in 1892. I started putting in some addresses as well, so you can see all that person's from my neighborhood or near where I grew up. She attended Altoona schools. Now, you didn't have to graduate back then to go to nursing school, so she left Altoona and went to nursing school in Pittsburgh. Graduated from the Southside Hospital School of Nursing in 1916. She then was part of the U.S. Army Volunteer Nursing Corps. Because this unit is not officially part of the Army, those ladies did not have rank. They were simply referred to as nurse and their last name instead of having an official rank, which also allowed the government not to give them any pension benefits after their service time. Like so many other the nurses that got involved when caring for the wounded coming back to the country, she contracted Spanish influenza, which was a deadly worldwide pandemic at the time, killing more than 50 million people. In fact, 127 nurses serving in the Volunteer Nurses Corps were killed during the war as a result of contracting Spanish influenza. She is buried in Fairview Cemetery. And like many of the markers in Fairview Cemetery, her stone there's a little askew, but certainly can still be appreciated as it sits there today. David Slagle was born in Altoona in 1891. We have someone here who's just a little bit older than the others that I've presented so far. Slagle had 6 siblings, so again, a rather large family. A member of the First Methodist Church, and trained as a florist at Myers Brothers Florist, which I believe recently closed. Yes. And worked as a florist until he was drafted on February 23rd, 1918. Now, the first thing before I read through this section here, take a look at that ship. And if you look at that, some of you might think, hey, that's the Titanic. Very good. It's the sister ship of the Titanic. That's the Olympic, and that's the ship they were using as a troop carrier. One of the ships used as a troop carrier to get men from the United States to Europe for the war. And there's a great story involved in this because the Olympic came under attack from a German submarine. But I can tell you the first battle between ships of this class was won by an iceberg. This one was won by the Olympic. The Olympic rammed the submarine and sunk it. So while the iceberg came out on top, in this case, the submarine, which they have very thin hulls, didn't stand a chance. Slagle was involved in multiple campaigns, and I think I took another piece of a letter that he wrote that was published in the newspaper at that time. I have been very fortunate so far. There is no use to become discouraged in an affair of this kind. I have been careful and am trying to do the best of my ability to do my duty, and someday, if it is God's will, I will come back to America. God be with you until we meet again. It's, considering what happened, it's a very powerful message. He was killed in action on September 6, 1918, during an assault on the Hindenburg Line and doing what then was called going over the top, which took a great deal of courage. You basically jump up out of the trench, run across no man's land, and attack the enemy. And so many of our soldiers were killed in operations such as that. He is also buried in France. Again, if the question comes up, where do you get all this information? Another place I use other than their military records is their draft registration cards, which usually has information about their occupation, which you see florist there in the middle. These are also available on Fold 3. Now, here's a name that I know some of you will say, hey, I know that one, because we had an American Legion post named for Charles Rowan. Again, we're going back here in age, born a little bit earlier than the others as well. July 13th, 1889, 6 siblings, lived on First Street in Altoona, a member of St. Mark's Catholic Church. He was inspector for the Pennsylvania Railroad. So the military is going to groom him for a position of leadership. He was 10 years a member of Company G of our local National Guard. He also served on the Mexican border crisis at that time. And then his unit was federalized, went to Camp Hancock. A lot of the camps at that time were named for the Civil War generals, and arrived in France in May of 1918, even though we joined the war in 17. Most of our soldiers didn't get there until 1918. He was involved in the defense of Paris, which he referred to as wonderful work. Thankfully, his letters were also included in the Altoona Mirror. Involved in heavy action at the Meuse-Argonne offensive. Now, how did he get a Legion post named for him? Well, during an offensive operation later in the war, a unit that was in front of his was to carry out an attack across an open area. They had no officers to lead the attack. So the commander in charge came to Rowan and said, would you be willing to lead this group into the attack? Your group's going to be in reserve. You'll lead them into attack. His response, you can see right there on the screen, what time do I report? Just moments before the attack was to start, the Germans opened up with an artillery barrage and attacked first. He was wounded in the abdomen, but remained at his duty post to organize the defense until the German assault was stopped. By then, he had lost a considerable amount of blood, and he perished at that battle. His grave marker, which is in St. John's Cemetery, is quite large. And he also has a memorial at the Boalsburg Military Museum, which is the State Museum of Pennsylvania. And those are both there, as you can see. I think this one I included for just a contrast in study. This is Calvin Neely, born in Duncansville, 8 siblings, again, a very large family. Both of his grandfathers served in the Civil War. He enlisted at the age of 18. And his rank was wagoneer. That's a rank that's on its way out because this is somebody in charge of a team of horses to move supplies and materials. But at the same time, if you talk about what's going out and what's coming in, he was also assigned to the 1st Anti-Aircraft Battalion. So while the horses are on their way out, the airplanes are now becoming a very important part of the operations. He was wounded in the hand, recovered from that, and then killed in action in November of 1918. He also is buried in France. Last one for World War I, and I think this is a powerful one to end with. June 14th, 1891, 5 sisters, 2 brothers. This one's from Juniata. In fact, Juniata had its own separate high school until 1929 was the last graduating class from Juniata High School. And he serves as a clerk for the Pennsylvania Railroad to save up money to go to Bucknell University. He then enrolled in Bucknell University, but when the semester ended, the war started. He said, I'm going to serve my country. Because he enlisted very early, he was assigned to the United States Army Ambulance Service and was shipped off to France. He actually served with the French Army. He would have been one of the first American soldiers to see action in the war. During one of the battles he was involved in, he drove his ambulance into no man's land, rescued several wounded soldiers, and actually took off his gas masks to help those men breathe who were stranded and wounded in the middle of the battlefield, and he was awarded by the French for that. And then he returned to Altoona, and the war was over. So if you're thinking, well, what's going on here? Aren't these people that didn't come home? Well, there's a sad ending to this one. His lungs were permanently damaged from the gas attack. He spent his remaining months here in Altoona very sick and then died in December of 1919, about 1 year after the war ended. Which there's certainly other cases probably of men who died of wounds that were lingering after the war, but to my knowledge, he's the last Blair County resident to die directly from causes from the war. Okay, so that's World War I. World War II. Here's my second question. Who knows where this one is? Okay, correct. That one is a memorial for George Wolfe, who was on the USS Arizona and killed at Pearl Harbor during World War II. So let's start out with one that I always feel a personal connection to this gentleman. Notice the move up in years as we are in World War II now. Born on February 18th, 1921, attended Altoona High School, member of the Sea Scouts, trombone player in the band, which I was as well, so I have that connection. Boys Federation president. He was a valedictorian, number one in his class. Class of 1939, enlisted in the Navy of 1940, and was shipped off for training. Assigned as a gunner's mate on the USS Helena, and he was there during the Pearl Harbor attack at 7:58. The Helena was torpedoed, opened up about an 18-foot hole inside of it, and 31 sailors were killed, including gunner's mate Pencil. He is buried in Arlington Cemetery, and there was an assembly held in his honor. There was another Altoona student killed there as well, Brooks Brubaker. There was an assembly held to honor them in 1942. That's a picture of his ship and his marker at Arlington National Cemetery. The second one, Richard Johnson. Richard Johnson was born in 1898 while his dad was deployed for the Spanish-American War. His grandfather, which would be my great-great-grandfather, Richard Thomas Johnson, was a decorated veteran of the American Civil War as part of the Marines, and he went on to be John Philip Sousa's first drum major in the Marine Corps Band. Johnson enlisted in the Army at age 16. He also served on the Mexican border crisis. He served during World War I, and then he was stationed in the Philippines after the war, which is why we don't have many good family pictures, because that's where he's going to spend the rest of his time after World War I. He left the military but was recalled once the threat from the Japanese became apparent in 1941. He became a liaison officer with the Philippine Army, between the American Army and the Philippine Army. When the Japanese invaded, he was involved in the defense of the Philippines, but unfortunately, like the soldiers there in the Philippines pretty much abandoned. We gave up hope on defending the Philippines. He was captured. He participated in the Bataan Death March, survived that, sent to Cabanatuan, which was basically a hellish prison camp operated by the Japanese, where he died in August of 1942. You'll see in the item printed in the newspaper that the family did not find out until the next year, until May of 1943. His remains are in the National Cemetery in St. Louis, Missouri, and there is not a definitive marker. He's in a group burial plot, which means they recovered part of his remains, but they're really not sure what's his and what's other soldiers that were lost their lives at that camp. I don't think we've had a Marine yet, so I think it's finally time to introduce our first Marine. Lyman, and if you're a sports fan, this one's for you. Lyman Reifsnyder, who went by Dutch, was born in 1920, graduated from Altoona High School in 1937, where he was a basketball standout. Went to Millersville, he was their team captain, all conference for 4 years. He held their all-time scoring record, which he still holds. And, very important to me, he was getting a degree in history education to become a teacher. He joined the Marines right after his graduation in May of 1942, went to amphibious assault training, and by January of 1944, he was in the Pacific. He was promoted after his leadership skills became evident during the invasion of Kwajalein, and then in June of 1944, he's killed in the attack on Saipan, for which he is awarded a Silver Star, which is a significant award for bravery. That's 2 notches below a Congressional Medal of Honor. And he's still a prominent display on Millersville Athletics, their university page, where I borrowed that picture. Sticking with the theme of sports, we have William Red Francis. Now, he's not a native Pennsylvania resident, born in Virginia in 1912, but he was a professional golfer. He did the rounds and was the golf pro at several local golf clubs, Tyrone, Mount Union, Bellefonte. And then in 1930, he became the golf pro at Blairmont until April of 1943. He married locally and had one son. He actually tried to enlist in the military in 1941. They told him, this was before Pearl Harbor, they told him, thanks, but no thanks, you're too old. Of course, that all changed on December 7th, 1941. So he went back in April of 1943. This time they were happy to have him. He joined the 5th Engineer Special Brigade. Let me tell you what they did. If you've seen Saving Private Ryan, there's a point where Tom Hanks is sort of in a little heated discussion with another gentleman, another soldier on the beach about moving away from a barricade that was there. And the soldier says, you go to another one, I have to blow this one up. He's in the group that has to blow up the barricades on the beach. That's their basic job. He's in the first wave on Omaha Beach on June 6, 1944, where he is killed. 96 members of his unit were killed in the first hours of that operation. He is buried at the Normandy Cemetery. His unit took such a beating, there's a special memorial to his unit on the beach in Normandy, which you can see there on the right of the screen. I have to tell you this story here. When I first read this, I had to catch my breath. And, I've read a lot of these stories about men and, as I mentioned, 2 women who lost their lives. But this one really, really sort of struck me hard. Walter Shum was born in 1924 here in Altoona. His friends knew him as Bob. He attended Altoona High School, but left his senior year. The Air Corps liked to get the smart guys out of high school and get them into training during the war. He arrived in England, was assigned to the famous 8th Air Force, who was tasked with bombing Germany during the day. The British took on the task of bombing them at night. We had to bomb them during the day, which was a very difficult task. He was a waist gunner on a B-24, which is a heavy 4-engine bomber, nicknamed the Square Dance. That's a rather innocent name, considering what some of the other planes were named. There's a B-24 silhouetted for you, and his job was waist gunner, can be seen here on the right. So he fired a machine gun at attacking enemy planes. On his 30th mission, and you know what that means, right? On the 30th mission, you get to go home. On his 30th mission, his plane was shot down after bombing Creole, France. An anti-aircraft shell actually exploded inside the plane, and 2 crewmen were killed instantly. The other 7 parachuted to the ground. 4 escaped, 3 were captured. Bob was captured because his leg was broken and couldn't escape despite the French resistance trying to help him. Now, here's the rest of the story that you're not going to see on this page. As he was captured by the Germans, they took him to a field hospital because he had a broken leg. So they were treating him, and of course they took his uniform off. When they took his uniform off, they discovered he was wearing a Star of David, indicating he was of the Jewish faith. A German officer came in, cut his throat, and killed him. After the war, his body was exhumed, and it was declared a war crime. The only resident of Altoona whose death was declared a war crime in all of the wars we've been involved in. In appreciation for his service, France has built 2 memorials to him. There's one of them to him and the other 2 crew members from his airplane that died. Here in Blair County, that's his marker. Sort of plain. Gives you an idea of the appreciation the French have. Ralph Staley, this is one of the 14 men from my church that was killed during the war. Ralph was a smart guy. He graduated from high school at age 16. Unfortunately for him, he lost his father when he was only 14. He grew very close to his mom. You can see how smart he was because he went on to Gettysburg College and participated in a whole list of activities. In fact, I couldn't list them all there. I just picked some of them. After his time at Gettysburg, he entered officers' candidate school and was shipped off to France. And during a German counteroffensive, he was killed. Now, what makes this an extremely sad story is he would often send his mother flowers during important events, for Mother's Day, for her birthday. And there was an article, a small article published in the paper. She was decidedly excited to receive flowers from him on her birthday, which was August 25th, because that told her that her son was still alive, when in fact he had been killed 4 days before. If you've been to First Lutheran Church, the organ that is at the church, a beautiful organ, and I'm not saying that just because I'm a member there, it is a beautiful organ, was purchased in memory of the 14 soldiers that were killed from First Lutheran Church. Okay, I told you there were 2 women. This is the other female, and I think that's such a classic example of a 1920s haircut. She graduated from Altoona High School in 1930, went to nursing school in New York City, enlisted in the Army Nurses Corps, and by now the women are recognized with rank. And she served with the 820th Air Evacuation Hospital. This is before MASH, so they're flying airplanes instead of helicopters. While deployed in the Pacific Theater, the C-46 transport plane she was on crashed into a mountainside in the Philippines. She is buried there today. All 7 crew, including her, as well as 30 passengers that were wounded, were all killed. I mentioned some of these are going to be neighbors. I grew up with his family living next to me. It was the house over, and I never really knew his story. John Hartsock is a graduate in 1935. He went to Notre Dame to get a degree in accounting. He returned to Altoona and worked for the Pennsylvania Edison Company until he joined the Army Air Force in 1942. He was awarded his wings. He serves as navigator on a B-29. That's the same type of plane that dropped the atomic bomb. And in December of 1944, his plane was shot down after a bombing mission to Nagoya, and it was lost over the sea. His body was never recovered. So for soldiers that weren't recovered, we created tablets of the missing that list all the names of those that are located in our major military cemeteries. This one being the National Cemetery of the Pacific, sometimes known by the nickname Punch Bowl, located in Hawaii. Last World War II, and this one is going to be a story that some of you are going to know. John Marshall was born in October of 1922, 4 brothers, and they all served in World War II. Altoona High School graduate, and fitting the bill of the previous stories, he also worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. And in 1943, he joined the Navy. And he's going to serve on a ship called the USS Indianapolis. Now, I can tell from some people's reactions, you already know exactly what happened. If that story was sort of forgotten until the character of Quint in Jaws, played by Robert Shaw, while they're on the boat during the evening and they're having quite a bit of alcohol, he recounts a story about being on the Indianapolis after they delivered, as he says it, the bomb, and talks about what happened next. So if you don't know that story, I'll put it in a short summary for you. The Indianapolis was on a secret mission to deliver the atomic bomb to Tinian. There was no record of where the ship was. It was attacked by a Japanese submarine, and it sunk in just 12 minutes. Many of the men were left floating in the water for days because no one knew the ship was missing because they didn't know where it was. While they were floating in the water, there were massive shark attacks, and a lot of the men lost their lives to shark attacks. This is not the only Blair County man who lost his life on this ship, so I just picked one as an example of a story. Okay, this is the beautiful memorial to the Indianapolis. It's located in Indianapolis, Indiana. Korean War. Anyone know where this is? That's going to be the tough one. Except my wife who took this picture. Okay. There are a few memorials to the Korean War in the whole country. And we have one to all of those that served in the Korean War right here in Blair County. It's in right next to the Geesetown Fire Hall. Yes. Yeah, very good. Okay, so I realized there was a lot of World War I and World War II. I did cut the list down for Korea and Vietnam as I look at my wife and she's saying, get moving. So Howard Smith, born in 1917 in Hazleton, moved to Altoona, was part of the Stagecraft Club, and his nickname was Snooky. Now, I don't want to stereotype, but if you find out you're going into battle with Snooky, you may not feel that's the best choice. So let's find out about Snooky going into battle. He was drafted in March of 1945, and while stationed in Italy after World War II, he met an Italian woman, married, and They had 2 children. He decided that the Army life was for him, so he re-enlisted in 1948. But look at the difference in the image. Maybe that's why we're not going to use Snooki anymore. He was sent to Korea just as the North Koreans invaded South Korea. He was involved in the breakout from the Pusan perimeter. He was killed in action on March 15th, 1951, awarded the Silver Star. He was assigned to a 37mm reconnaissance rifle platoon, and the unit in front of him ran into a crossfire of 2 Chinese emplacements. First thing he did is crawled forward and retrieved one of the wounded men and brought him back to safety. He then went forward and eliminated one of the Chinese positions, and then started crawling toward the next one when he was killed in action. Quite the action for Snooki. So we're going to learn not to judge people by their nickname after an operation like that. There is his marker. Ward Green, up until 1947, when Harry Truman desegregated the military, those that served in the military that were African American were pretty much limited to jobs like cook and things like that. Green did serve during World War II. Prior to that, he was described as one of the best athletes in the Altoona area. He played both semi-pro football and baseball. Who knows, had it been after there wasn't so much segregation, maybe he would have been a star athlete, but we just don't know those things. He served in the Navy for 34 months during World War II, came home to Altoona, and worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. Once the military was desegregated, he says, I want to give this a shot with a job that might be more suited for me. So he went back in 1948. He was sent to Korea in 1950. He was wounded twice. In fact, he wrote home to his family that since I carried an automatic rifle, the muzzle flash often drew the attention of the enemy. He was taken prisoner on February 11, 1951, sent to a mining camp for forced labor, where he died there. His body has never been recovered. This is the letter, part of the letter he sent as a prisoner of war. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I will tell you it reeks of Chinese propaganda because it says, I've been captured as a prisoner, I'm okay, but American planes keep bombing where I'm at and they've killed civilians. It really reeks of Chinese propaganda. Not that those things didn't happen, but it fits the bill for that. John Fitzgerald, October 1928, Altoona High School graduate on the track team, involved in student government. Another one of our veterans that's married, and he was a member of St. Leo's Catholic Church. He lived in a house I actually delivered newspapers to. Again, growing up, I didn't know whose family who still lived there. I didn't know. You just wish sometimes you knew those things. He joined the Marine Corps in 1946. He decided that after being in the Marine Corps for several years, he wanted to be a pilot. So he became an aviation cadet, graduated from that in 1950, and was deployed to Korea. But hold on, stop first. They tell him on your way, I want you to stop at Camp Pendleton. We have an assignment for you. He gets to Camp Pendleton. They're filming a movie called The Flying Leathernecks. How many of you have seen it? John Wayne. All the flight scenes in that movie are him. Not John Wayne, not the other actors. He's flying the scenes in that movie. So unique opportunity. You can actually see Lieutenant Fitzgerald flying, which we can't really do for most of the other fellows involved here. On his third mission, he had a direct hit from ground fire, and his plane crashed and he was killed. He also is buried in Arlington Cemetery. I really like the squadron symbol for his group, the Death Rattlers. There's actually a jacket from his group now currently on eBay, and I keep telling myself no. But I think it would be an interesting artifact to add to my collection. William Sitman, this is one you may know. William Sitman's from Bellwood. He was a three-sport athlete. Married in 1942, joined the Army, served with Patton's Third Army, fighting his way through France in World War II into Germany. Like many others, he returned and worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad. He also re-enlisted in 1949. Now assigned to the 2nd Division, he was a Marine Gun Section Leader. And in operation during the Battle of Chip Yong Ni, his Machine gun unit came under attack. The enemy lobbed a grenade in. The grenade landed in the middle of 6 men. He chose to dive on that grenade, accepted the full force of the blast in his body, and was killed instantly. He was awarded the Congressional Medal of Honor. If you go to Main Street in Bellwood, their memorial there for soldiers has a specific section dedicated to Medal of Honor winner Sitman. There's the Secretary of Defense presenting his family with his Medal of Honor. Okay, the Vietnam War. U.S. involvement, of course, was 1964 after the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution through to 1973, but we had advisors there outside of that period. Now, here's the tricky one. I think I can beat everyone on this one. This is a monument to those that are missing in action. Anybody know where this is located? Okay, I figured I had you on that one. I will tell you in a little bit where that one's located. It's part of a monument called the Freedom Tree. That help anybody? Okay. So you can notice the difference in clothing. You know, we went from like senior yearbook pictures that had ties and jackets and so forth. Now we have a less formal picture for a yearbook photo here. Born in Washington, D.C., came to Altoona High School, was a member of the wrestling team and gymnastics, Boy Scout, First Methodist Church, and enlisted in the Marine Corps his senior year. Went off to training at Parris Island. In Vietnam in January of 1967 with the 1st Marine Division. During a sweep of a village, he was awarded a Silver Star for a one-man assault. His unit was ambushed. He, after helping to evacuate the wounded, he went forward and wiped out one position with 3 hand grenades. Went back, got 2 more, wiped out the other position. In the process, he was wounded, but he was awarded a Silver Star for that. The picture on the left is him holding his Purple Heart for that operation. Sadly, just a couple of months later, during Operation DeSoto, which was a search and destroy mission, he activated a tripwire, which detonated explosive, and he lost his life. His marker is in Oak Ridge Cemetery, and it really stands out, which you can see there with the marker pictured on the left. On the right is his family and what I believe is his girlfriend receiving his Silver Star Award. I really talked about trying to personalize these people and tell you that part of their story. In January of 1950, Clyde Walter is born. He's from Claysburg. 10 siblings, so not a small family here. Attended Central High School. Again, great resources when I can find information about these people. This comes directly from a family member. Clyde came for dinner every Sunday for sweet potatoes and then took me for Tootsie Rolls in his convertible. I think it makes it more personable for each one of these stories. He worked for the Pennsylvania Shoe Company. Corporal Walter was assigned to the Air Cav, arrived in Vietnam. He was wounded and refused treatment, saving fellow soldiers. For that, he was awarded a Silver Star. And then during a 1970 patrol, his unit was ambushed and he was killed during that operation. He is buried in Mount Hope Cemetery. There's his marker. Richard Curry, another athlete, track member. 508 Walton Avenue was his address, born in 1937, Altoona High School graduate. He was also involved in the band. He was the captain of the track and cross country team, which won a state title. Went to William & Mary on a full track scholarship, eventually transferred to Indiana State Teachers College, which today is IUP. He became a math teacher. He actually subbed at Altoona High School before he eventually joined the Army. In 1961, he served in the U.S. and in Europe. He eventually was deployed to Europe, serving at the largest Army base in Vietnam at Long Binh. During his time there, he spent his spare time helping to improve an orphanage. With his paychecks, he would buy materials for them and supplies, and also do the same thing for a local village. On February 23rd, 1969, the Long Binh base came under heavy mortar attack from the Viet Cong, and as part of the rally to defeat that, he jumped onto a Jeep, rode up to the front of the perimeter, opened fire on the attacking enemy, and helped to defeat the attackers, except a few sappers were able to crawl through the line. One of them got behind his position and shot and killed him. At his funeral, his family collected donations to send to the orphanage to continue to help them even after he had died. The stage at Long Bend, which was used for U.S. shows, was also named in his honor. And there you can see his grave marker at Arlington. Sheldon Schultz, that marker I pointed out to you earlier about being missing in action, is dedicated to him and is outside of the Altoona High School. It's about 15 feet off of the mountain lion. Born in 1948, graduated in 1966. The last year it was just Altoona High School, and then it became Altoona Area High School. Involved in Boy Scouts and College Club, was married, became a helicopter pilot. During a insertion mission in Vietnam, his helicopter was shot down, and it took them a little more than 10 years to finally declare him deceased after he was missing in action. His body was recovered in 2006. There is a memorial marker for him in Grandview Cemetery. I had to think about which one it was. Grandview Cemetery, and he is now, his remains are in Arlington. If you played local baseball, I did, you might have heard of a team called Corporal Miller. Eddie Miller was born in 1947 in Altoona, West Chestnut Avenue, not far from where I grew up. He attended Altoona High School, and then during his senior year, he went to Williamsport and enrolled in the technical school there. He was a member of Our Lady of Lourdes. He played for the 9th Ward Federation baseball team and was probably one of the first employees at the newly opened Logan Valley Mall. He went to Vietnam, and he was selected to be on the cover of Life magazine, the October 27, 1967 edition, except the editors, when they saw the picture of him smiling, thought it was inappropriate to have a smiling soldier on the cover. So instead they had another soldier. He was pictured inside the magazine. But if you find a copy of the October 27, 1967 edition, you'll find Corporal Miller pictured there, as they called him, the Happy Warrior, inside the magazine. He was killed from fragmentation wounds in 1968. He is buried in Alto Rest Cemetery. The Corporal Miller baseball team, which existed for many years, paid tribute to him. And I do have to tell this bit of the story so it's not forgotten. Long after the money ran out to sponsor this baseball team, the coach of the team, Tom Stout, who was my coach when I was a kid, without anyone knowing, continued to pay that fee to name the team Corporal Miller instead of having a corporate sponsor to keep his memory alive. And only recently, after he died a few years ago, has the team no longer been named Corporal Miller. Okay, the end is in sight. I hope I haven't talked your ears off. If you recognize the World War II picture I had up earlier, then you probably recognize this one. Only one soldier from Blair County was killed during the Persian Gulf operations in 1991, and that was Dwayne Holland Jr., Bellwood High School graduate in 1985, the same year I graduated from high school, was married, was a part of the 477th Transportation Company, deployed to Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, where, in a famous incident that most people can remember, a Scud missile was hit by a Patriot missile, but parts of it fell on a dormitory, essentially, that the 477th was staying in, and that's where he and a number of other members were killed. There is his grave marker. All right, the War on Terror. Mike Hook. I'm going to start with Mike because Mike is one of my students. And Mike was a 2001 Altoona High School graduate, and he was quite the wrestler and football player. And I can tell you, every day when he walked into my class, I had one of those really comfortable, cushiony desk chairs. He first started out by coming in saying, "Can I sit in your chair today?" And then after a period of time, he wouldn't ask. He'd just raise his eyebrows and look at it, and I'd say, "Sure." Boy, am I glad I never said no. He loved hunting and fishing. He was engaged and had a son named Mason. Became a roofing contractor, but he wanted a little bit more for himself, so he enlisted in the Army in 2005. You can see what I mean by him being quite a football player and wrestler. He was with the 25th Infantry Division in Hawaii, deployed to Iraq in 2007. He was wounded by a roadside bomb, and then on August 22nd, 2007, his Black Hawk helicopter crashed, killing him and the entire team he was a part of. There's a story out there that inviting families to the White House near the end of the presidency of George Bush, that President Bush, upon meeting a young child that was a son of one of the veterans, he started to cry. That was Mike Hook's son. So if you ever come across that story, now you know who the small boy was that caused that emotional reaction from President Bush. He is buried in Calvary Cemetery. Ron Baum, I went to high school with Ron, member of the ski club, soccer team. Here's another one. You don't want to go by his nickname to make any assumptions. His nickname in high school was Biff. Big Steelers, Pirates, and Penguins fan like a lot of us. Member of the Trailblazers Club. This one always strikes me. They went out and did hiking, so I thought, okay, what kind of hiking? They went up to the Adirondacks in New York and hiked the whole way into Canada. So this isn't just let's go out for an hour and explore the woods. This is some serious hiking. He joined the Marine Corps with his brother Brian as part of the buddy system. Boy, and he's got a long service record in the Marine Corps. Remember, this is somebody who graduated in 1985. Served in the Persian Gulf War, was assigned to the Intelligence Training Center, was involved in Operation Safe Departure, which was in Eritrea. Eritrea is on the eastern coast of Africa. He earned there his first of 3 Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medals. He became an instructor at Naval Survival School and then went to Iraq in 2003 as an intelligence specialist. And the Humvee he was riding on was attacked by insurgent forces, and he evacuated his crew from the Humvee, and then he returned to mount the weapon on the top of it when it was struck again, and he was killed. Baum Hall at the Navy Intelligence Center, the Counterintelligence Center, is named for him. The plaque is there courtesy of his family was kind enough to share that with me. If you're wondering why I didn't have better pictures for some of these, one of the things I would not do is contact the families. Even though there might be 99 families out of 100 that say thank you for telling these stories, if there was one family that didn't want to have these memories brought up, that was more important to me to protect that one family than bother them with it. Last one. Matt Ingham, born 1984, was an Altoona Mirror carrier, like probably many of us in the room were. Graduate of Altoona High School and the VOTEC, essentially, in the class of 2002. Loved to ride motocross. In fact, when he was stationed in Okinawa, he rode professionally. Loved the outdoors also. While he was a senior in high school, that's when the 9/11 attacks took place. He decided, I'm going to join the military after graduation and defend my country. Staff Sergeant Ingham now was enlisted in 2002, like I said, right after the 9/11 attacks and his graduation. Served 2 tours of duty in Iraq and then went deployed to Afghanistan in 2009. Where during a patrol there, his unit was ambushed. During the ambush, his radio operator was killed. He crawled forward to where the radio operator had fallen, called for an airstrike, which saved the rest of the members in his unit, but he was killed after calling in the airstrike. He is buried in Grandview Cemetery in Altoona. The reason why I made this a little bit of a quiz was that 2 of the publications I recently did are on all the war memorials in the Altoona area, which is the one that you see on the left, and the ones in Blair County, which is what you see on the right. There are more than 25 in each publication. They are list price at $12, but as a special for those that attended tonight, we're offering them for $10. They're both for sale outside, and they have great information. Color photographs taken by my expert wife photographer, and the history is written by me. I'll just say that I hope you learned some stories tonight that you can carry on and use on Memorial this day to honor the fallen. Thank you.